Colleen with Designs of Value Art, and today I'm going to show you how I create a study for a painting process. Say I haven't painted something in quite some time, or I have never painted a Gladiola, which is what this is, and that happens to be the case. I have never painted a Gladiola before. So what I've done is I've taken this petal and this petal, and I put it on an Arches 140-pound sheet, and I just sketched it on. I should probably erase some of that because it looks pretty dark. The two center petals on the bottom flower and the two center petals on the top flower. So I'm just going to take my kneaded eraser, kind of wake it up a little bit here, and I'm going to just run it over. I just pencil sketch these on. Should come off fairly easy. And lighten these up a little bit. The edges are all going to be pretty much in the orange values, but this top one probably won't be, so we want to make sure we get that nice and light. The yellow has a hard time covering up graphite or pencil. So I usually do this with my kneaded eraser, and then the next thing I do is take my white, I think it's a Faber-Castell eraser as well. Yeah, there it is. Right where I left it, that's a good thing. So it's just a little Faber-Castell white eraser. This paper is phenomenal. It allows you to erase without damaging it. This is Arches. Most of the 100% cotton papers will allow you to erase. Now it probably looks like I'm pushing pretty hard and really scrubbing, but no, I'm not. The eraser's doing the majority of the work. And I have found by using the kneaded eraser first, then this eraser will take up even more of that graphite. Okay, put that right back where I got it so I know where it is next time. And I'm just going to take this and put it right over my waste paper here and get rid of all the crumbs. Okay, then I like to even take a piece of paper towel, because you don't want any of that in your painting. Even though this is just a study of two different petals, you still don't want. Now as I do this study, it's going to be included, a copy of it will be included in my workbook for the class itself. So you will get a copy of it. Now what I'm doing is I'm opening up my jar of clean, fresh water that does have some of the Winsor & Newton blending and glazing medium in it. That's how I paint. It's what I use each and every time I'm glazing with water, is right out of this little jar. And again, I use just a separate brush. This one happens to be a Princeton Long Round. It's red. That was one of the reasons I chose it. But it also has a nice pointed tip on it. You can probably see it better that way. It's a longer bristle, which I like. So let's start up here. And we're going to put some, now I got my colors chosen. If you caught my other shorts, this is, you'll see me choose the colors and you'll see me create my color map for this design. I'm just adding the water in right where I want it. You want to make sure you get it right up to the edge, but you don't want to go over if you can help it. If you do go over, pick it up with a piece of paper towel And if it's too moist, you can't pick it all up, let it completely dry, and then go back and add another glaze of water, but be careful that you don't go over the edge. Now when I sketch this on, for these little dark areas, I just put in these little triangles, so that tells me where they go. Everybody's got their own way of doing their designs to remind yourself that something needs to go there. I'm looking at the side of my paper because I want to be able to see where my water glaze is, and did it go over my edges? Is it right up to the edge? So we're going to let that set up for just a minute because it needs to soak in. This is the first time we're adding water to this petal, so we want to make sure that that soaks in a little bit, and then we're going to go back over it with just a slight amount of water just to kind of smooth everything in. Start in the middle, and you don't need a ton of water on the second coat, but you want to be able to smooth everything to the edge, being very careful. I consider glazing the water just as important as putting in the paint in my paintings. Okay, so I have no puddles. Everything looks nice and smooth. So I'm going to set my water brush aside. I'm going to go to a 6, and that again is a Billy Showell. She's got the nice long bristles, a nice pointed tip. I absolutely love her brushes. And we're going to start with the yellow. I'm going to do the mid-value yellow first. You always go from light to dark. Add some water into mine. Alright, so we're doing this petal first. So to me, the thing that stands out is this stripe right down the center there is the brightest. But we're going to put the whole thing in the mid value, or the lightest value, I'm sorry. And then we'll go in and put in the mid value and then the darks. Now there's not a whole lot of yellow beyond that area. And another reason I like to use that blending and glazing medium is it allows me to go ahead then and add in the oranges, because it allows this paint to stay moist longer, doesn't dry quite as quickly even though I have that water on there, but lets me play with the paint a little bit better, or longer I should say, is probably the best way to say that. Now some of this does come up here, and there is just a little bit over in here. Now we need the mid-value yellow. Which is going to be over here on this side. See that nice value change? It's exactly what you want. So right up this edge here, it's darker. That area, it's darker. And that actually does come down to meet this area down here. It's darker in here. All I'm doing is looking at my reference material, which I probably got on Pixabay. Now I'm kind of leaving that highlight up the middle nice and bright light. And if we need to reinforce that, we can. Not a big deal. Okay, so there we've got that value in there. Now there are some darker values in this petal too, in the yellow. So I'm just picking up the darkest value, and I would say right in here, it's darker. Right down this side, it's darker. And right in this section, it's darker. Now before that dries, what we want to do is I'm going to clean out my brush, and I'm going to pick up my light value orange. I'm going to lay in my orange values up here. And again, I'm going to go around that light streak down the middle. I don't want to get that lost if I can help it. And some of this actually comes down like this. Again, this is our lightest value orange. And I'm just studying my reference material as I go. It doesn't hurt. Watch a lot of TV at night, and I do a lot of sketching and Inktense pencil painting and different things like that. But it doesn't hurt while you're watching a show to sit and study the project you plan on painting. Just study your reference material. How many colors do you think you're going to need in the orange? How many colors do you think you're going to need in the yellow? Now we're going to go to our mid-value orange. Since this is still moist, we have the capability. I'm going to go down to a 4 for this. A little bit easier for me. There we go. And we're going to just reinforce some of these darker areas. I'm pretty moist, so I'm going to dab some of that off. Darker up in here. Now this is just our first layer of paint. This is not the detail, but we can see our values as we go. Where is it the darkest? Where is it the lightest? All of that. So you want to be sure and pay attention to that. So now I'm going to go into my darkest value. I'm not even going to clean my brush. I'm just going to go right into the dark. There is some right down in here too, right on this edge. I'm going to reinforce this edge just a little bit. You don't want to cover up all of your previous laydown of color because you want to see the 3 values. Moist right there, so I'm gonna reload and wipe some of it off. So it's dark right in there, it's dark right over here, and it's dark over here. And there, we've got our first layer of paint color mapped in. Of course, this is just a separate petal. It's not the entire flower, but it gives us a really good idea. We need just a little bit of that orange in here. I like that. Do that up here too. Just like that. Okay. We're going to let that one set up, and I'm going to get my water brush out, and we're going to do this one down here. Move this up a little bit so you can see me better. I'm going to start with the water, of course. You always want to put a glaze of water down. Now here I did go over the top, but I did that on purpose because as I look at the tracing, it doesn't appear to me to come up as far as it needed to right there. So I'm just creating that with my water glaze. And don't feel just because you're tracing and saying one thing, but you feel it needs to be something else, make it what it needs to be. You're the artist. You have the option to correct your own mistakes. You don't have to follow the reference material 100%. There's times you get a reference material and for example, on a rose, I just finished a rosebud. It was a picture that I took actually years ago in my yard at my old home. It was just a beautiful little yellow rose with pink accents on it. And the sepal was finishing right where the new leaf started. There was a big leaf there, and it just didn't look right, so I extended the length of the sepal a little bit further. So first of all, your eye could see that that's what was happening, is that sepal, making sure I got everything covered here, needed to be finished, and I'm just doing my second coat right away of the glaze of water, going up to the edge, just kind of smoothing everything in, making sure there's no puddles, all those good things. But yeah, so I just made that look the way it should have looked, as an artist needs it to look, because if you have one object completing right where the other object starts, your eye can't quite understand what's happening as you look at it. Okay, so we've got more yellow than anything on this one. We got a lot of dark over here, orange. We got a lot of dark orange up there, but the majority of this, I would say 3/4 of it, is yellow. So I'm going to pick up my yellow, my light value yellow. I'm going to start there, and I'm going to put it right over where the orange is, because that's perfect. It's what you want. You want it all to blend together. All your colors, you want them to blend together. That's why we do a close value when we mix them, so that they all go together well and blend easily. And a lot of blending in the watercolor world is just our water does our blending for us a lot of the times. Sometimes we'll have to blend it in, but most of the time the water will do the trick for us, which is nice. Just reloading my brush when I'm going off camera. Actually almost out of this color. It's crazy. Alright. It's another reason I like to do petal by petal too. Each time you do one petal, especially one that's as large as these are, you're probably going to need to remake your paint. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to have a different value from petal to petal, but you do, because that's what makes it realistic. If you have, I looked at a really lovely painting, and it was in the decorative art world, and I mean, the rose was just absolutely stunning. But then you got to the leaves, and it was the same leaf, the same leaf, the same leaf. Each and every leaf was identical to each other. And it just really did not make that painting look realistic. And I watched this artist grow over the years. I was in the decorative artist world for many years. And she figured that out and learned how to do different leaves. A lot of things in the decorative artist world, you just sit down and you do your own sketches, which I really enjoyed because I love to sketch. So you're not following a reference photograph, that type of thing. So what I'm doing here is I'm just adding in the darker yellow. We've got some in here and comes down here and goes up there. So that's what I've got in. That's the mid value. Now let's go ahead and put in the darker value. Seems to need just a touch more of the burnt sienna. But that's good that you don't have the exact same color from petal to petal. You don't want it to look like a cookie cutter design, because nature doesn't create anything in cookie cutter fashion, and it just doesn't look realistic if that's the way you do your paintings, unfortunately. So I'm just putting in the third value yellow where I see the darkest values. There is one right in here too, under that fold. Okay, so now I'm cleaning out my brush, setting it aside, going to a number 4. And while we still have that moist on our paper, we're going to start our dark orange color, well, our light orange basically, and then we'll go to our dark. Now with this being nice and moist like it is, we should have plenty of time to play with this. And again, this is just our first value of orange, so it's our lightest. We do have some in here. Some over here, add some more up there. And this comes actually right around the corner here, just like that. I went outside the edge, so I can either go back with an eradicator later or just make my edge a little bit bigger, which is what I just did here. So that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to create a little bit more of my paint here because it's almost gone. So I got my mid value, and I got a drip on my ferrule, so I don't want it to drip onto my paper. Still pretty moist right there. But again, we're not putting in detail, we're just putting in values at this point. And this is not our darkest color, this is just our mid value still. Alright, so I'm going to clean my brush. And this last color is just straight Alizarin Crimson Deep. In some of the colors. Where it's the darkest, and then the detail we put in will actually create a lot more. All right, this actually comes over like that. It's kind of hard to do with the paper soaking wet like that, but there, we've got our first two leaves color mapped in. And I'm going to dry these, and then we'll go ahead and add a little bit of the detail, and then we're going to do a glaze over all of them. So I'll be right back with you. Okay, I got everything nice and dry, and I always like to tell my classes, my students, let your paper cool to the touch, because if you leave it hot and then you go and add more paint to it, what happens is it sucks up that paint and it really becomes very dry and difficult to make your design do what you want that design to do. So now I'm picking up my number 4, cleaning it out just to be safe. Don't have any color in it. And I use baby cloths, or I should say baby diapers, as cloth. Everybody uses something different. I love these because they are so absorbent. I keep one on my lap, and if I have too much paint on my brush or too much water on my brush, I can just quickly tap it on my baby cloth and it will suck some of that water away. Now what I want to do here on this bottom one is I kind of lost some of that brightness right there that I wanted to keep. So I'm just going to go over that real quickly, and since I don't have any water on my paper, eyelash or something in there we go, I am going to spread it out nice and far, clean my brush, and then at the edge of that, I'm going to just run my tip of my brush through it, and by laying it down, I'm adding clear water around the outside of what I just laid down in paint. What that does then is it gives it some place to blend into, and you don't end up with a harsh line. Now this line you want to be pretty straight because that's the fold of the petal. Okay, so let's go back up to our original. I want to clean this out a little bit because I didn't get it quite as bright as I would like. I'm okay down here, but I would like to get it a little bit brighter up there. So what are our options to get that cleaned out? First thing I normally reach for is my eradicator. It's just, again, it's a Billy Showell brush. It's just a nice little flat. It's not a short bristled flat. It's got long bristles on it. Not exceptionally long, just normally long. I always want to have a piece of clean paper towel in one hand. Go ahead and look at my reference photo one more time. And I'm just wiggling that paint. See how that just removed the paint? Wipe it off in between so you don't reapply the paint you just removed. Pick it up with the clean paper towel. Clean the brush in between each time you lay it down. Now that was the easiest way that I know how to create what I was looking for there. I just felt that I did not quite have this the way I wanted it, so I just recreated it. I don't have to add any more color onto it. It just is perfect the way it is. Okay, so let's do some more detail. We're going to start on this one. I'm going to pick up my number 4, and I'm going to wet my brush. I don't want it dripping wet, but I want some moisture in it. And now this is going to be wet paint on my bristles on dry paper. So what we're going to have to do is add in some moisture so it has a place to go and doesn't dry harshly. Now I want this to be a little darker in here. Didn't quite get as dark as I would have liked. So right there. Cleaning my brush. Laying it down flat on the paper. And rubbing just the tip of that brush to the outside edge of that paint that I just laid down, because I want it to have a flow of water for it to blend into. So there, I'm happier with that. And that's kind of what you're doing at this point. You're going around and looking to see what can I do to create this to look a little bit more like either in my mind's eye that I want it to look, or like my reference material. And I'm pretty much just glancing right at my reference material as I go. Now this is pretty bright right in here. And it's fairly bold right there. And that's pretty good. There's another bright spot up here. All right, clean my brush. Soften the edges just a little, just so they don't create a harsh line. Now, if I would go in and just cover this entire thing with the amount of water I have on my brush right now, I would create a bloom, and a bloom is where it spreads out and it creates those bloomy bubble type things, and that it just doesn't look right. I know some people put that in their backgrounds, and that's fine. Everybody's got a different taste to their watercolor and how they like it to look. To me, I don't care for that. So I like to control that. Now we're going to create a few more streaks right in here. Now these ones I don't think we'll have to soften at all. They're pretty much just lines right in there, so if that dries like a line, that's what it's supposed to be. All right. Now I'm going to pick up my dark value yellow. And again, I'm just going to add in a little bit more burnt sienna to it. This never seems to hold that color for some reason. And I'm just going to create a few lines over here on this edge. Just like that. Now I didn't put any water down, so I've got a clean brush, and I'm just going to gently soften those in, or remove any that you don't like. It came out too harsh or whatever. And just soften that in. Alright, I think I'm going to just add in a few more while that's moist. Okay, so good. We're good with that. I'm going to do pretty much the same thing over here. There's a little bit of a wrinkle right there. And first of all, I'm going to make this yellow. I pretty much got it orange in there, so we're going to just build that up a little bit. And since I don't want a line on it, or a harsh line, I'm going to just add some water to the outside edge. And I'm just going to turn this a tad so I can get at it. Picking up the wrong color here. I want the dark value yellow. Here I'm mixing with my good brush, which is a big no-no. And the reason that's a no-no is it just wears them out faster. That's why that mixing brush is so nice to have. Okay, so I've got, try it on my baby cloth, just the dark value in my brush. I'm putting wet on dry. I guess this is just a little moist because I just laid down. I'm just going to put a few lines in here. It's pretty dark. It's a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to pick that up by adding water to it while it's wet. Keep using a clean paper towel right where you want it. I'm throwing all my brushes around over here because I didn't want that to dry real quick. Okay, so there you have a real easy way of correcting a mistake. And I think the reason I made the mistake is I didn't use the tip of my brush. I was more worried about the color value. So I'm just going to load the tip of my brush this time. All I'm trying to do is create a little bit. It still seems to be too dark. Too much of the burnt sienna in there. So I cleaned out my brush. Lay down fresh water. Wiggle everything away. Just like doing an eradicator, but it's still moist, so it's easier to pick up. You don't have to wait till it dries. All right, so I don't seem to be having any success. I'm going to go to the first value orange once and see if maybe that shouldn't be the value there. So I just loaded the tip of my brush. Now I felt that I had too much moisture on my brush. So all I'm doing is rolling right by the ferrule, the bristles on my paper towel, and see, it picks up that color. So that tells me I was right in thinking I had too much color on there, because I did. So I'm just going to gently, that's better. That's what I needed all along. See, I had the wrong value. And until you try something different than what you were doing, you won't know how to correct what you had done. So you got to try different things. And again, this is the first time I've ever painted a Gladiola. I just softened it in. Just soften these in again. Do the same thing over there. Just want to create a shade of this color. So I'm basically doing it almost like a dry brush. My brush isn't quite as dry as it could be for a dry brush. So I've cleaned out my brush. Just gonna soften it in a little bit, just a touch. I want to keep the lines, but I just want them to fade out. Okay. Soften this in a little bit here. Seems to be a little harsh right there. I think my glaze will help fix that too. I'm going to take my darkest orange, which is straight Alizarin Crimson Deep. Picking up some more color here. Make sure that I don't have too much color on my brush. Right next to this highlight that we put in is a nice dark, actually is a dent in the petal right there, but it creates that line. And then you've got that same thing down here, almost in a triangle. But you want to make sure you get it right to the edge of the petal. Now that was moist, so it is spreading. And as long as it's spreading, I'm just going to soften it in. Cleaning out my brush. I am going to soften this edge too, not a lot. Just don't want a harsh line completely on there. Soften this edge away. Now on this edge, I'm just going to soften this edge away as well. This top edge can stay like it is. There we go. So we got those two in. Now there is one, a darker value. It's shorter. Just like that. Clean my brush. Soften that edge. I'm going to turn my... And don't feel bad if you have to turn your paper. I just have this taped down to a board. This section needs to be darker. That looks good. And then there's another one right here. And this one's pretty much a straight line. And there's one right up here, but I'm going to add just a touch of water to it. Kind of by alizarin crimson water. And then I'm going to just darken this one edge. Clean my brush, wipe off the majority of the moisture, and then soften this edge. Pick up the same alizarin crimson deep. Just bringing my brush to a point, making sure I don't have any drips on my ferrule. We're going to do line work here, so you want to make sure you've got that nice tip. I'm just wanting to see, this is going to go right down this highlight. And then there's a darker value over here as well. And it kind of goes just like that, so I think we will really need to soften that in too much. Reinforce that line. Okay, I'm just looking to see if there's any more real dark ones. Kind of like right in here. On the edge of this. I'm going to turn that so I can soften it. Just the tip of my brush laying flat to the paper. Alright. Now I'm going to dry this one more time Although I do see another spot here. I want to run a little bit of the dark right down here. And a little bit of it down in here too. And then now we're going to do some mid-value orange after we get this dry. So I'll be right back with you. Okay, so I've got everything dry. Let's just do a straight water glaze, and I'm going to use the water that has the blending and glazing medium in it. And I'm just going to be very gentle and go over the top of everything on this petal. Because if you press down too hard, you're going to pick up everything we just did. And you do not want to do that. And I want to finish at least one leaf to, or petal to completion, so you can see. It's really important to go ahead and do all of the petals that we have drawn on here, because you will be just shocked at how your skills improve by painting each one of these petals. I had painted a still life. It's a pumpkin squash with a gourd and an apple, and I'd been a long time since I had painted an apple. So I painted to get ready, and what we're doing here is we're just going to add in, for the glaze color, the lightest value yellow. So I'm just creating a little bit more of it here. So that was almost out. And that's good, because you don't necessarily want that soaking wet when you put this glaze on anyway. So okay, I've got a lot of paint on my brush. But when I did that apple design, along with all the other items in the still life, I hadn't painted an apple in quite some time, so I painted 5 different apples. I know it's a lot of apples, but you know, there's so many different apples out there. You could have a golden apple, you could have a green apple, solid red apple. Again, there's so many different. Now you're going to go right over your highlights. This is not going to take those away. It'll darken the value, but they'll still be there. They'll still shine through as the highlight. So all I'm doing is glazing this. Over the entire leaf. And what that does is it kind of sets those details down in to the petal, and it makes them a part of that petal, so it doesn't look like they're just sitting on top of there and they're not realistic. Okay, see how different that made that petal look? Now I'm going to dry that, and I'm going to actually do one more glaze. So I'll be right back with you. So I got everything dry and cool to the touch. Yep. And I'm going to take our mid-value orange, which is our light value, and a little bit more alizarin crimson deep. Not much, but some. And we're going to create some of the, yeah, see, way too much moisture on my brush. Just pick that up, clean my brush, and start over. Go back to my palette. Take some of that moisture out of my brush. And if I have to, I can do that as well. Okay. Now let's start right up with this tip here and get some of this mid-value back in. It seems to have just kind of faded away. Be sure not lose that. So I'm just going to do this. Does go right up to the dark value, and in some cases it'll actually end up going right over some of that dark value too. Just reloading my brush, bringing it to a point, making sure I don't have too much on my bristles. Now you don't want to cover up all of your darks, but some of them will be just adding in some of the streakiness that the design has. Get some back in here because this is pretty faded, almost is the word I would use. Same thing over here. I'm going to get some of that value back in there. Now I'm going to clean my brush, wipe off any drips, and we're just going to soften that in. Go right over the top of it like a glaze. I don't want to lose those streaks, but I don't want them to be real harsh either. See, now I had a harsh line starting right there, and I just stopped it by doing this glaze business. Soften that in a little bit there. Now let's go over to the other side of that petal. I got too much water on the brush again. Just pick that up, lean my brush. And I'm going to create a little bit more color. Now, if you felt more comfortable doing this with a liner, you certainly could. I personally would prefer to use the larger brush. I was taught in the decorative arts world to use the largest brush that you can, because then you're controlling your brush. Okay, so we got that on there, but we want to get this down here too. A little bit more mid-value orange over in here. There we go. Softening that in. Reloading my water on my brush as I need to. Now we're going to do a glaze over the top of this too and see how it looks. All right, I'm going to dry this and then we're going to do our glaze over the top. So I'll be right back with you. All right, I've got that nice and dry, cool to the touch. I did go ahead and I marked what this is, and I just put down Petal Study Yellow Orange Gladiola, so that I will include this right in with the workbook. Now, before I put my final glaze on there, I can see a couple things that I want to change or add to it. I want to bring these out, and I want to bring it up in this area. And what that is our mid-value. So I'm going to just create a little bit more of that because it's almost gone. Get my mixing brush out here. So I've got the lemon yellow I'm adding in. And see, I'm going to go through an awful lot of lemon yellow and Sennelier Yellow painting this design. Now I'm adding in the Sennelier Yellow. And I'm looking back at my color map, and that's all it was. It's those two colors. There we go. Cleaning out my mixing brush so I don't picking up my color. Actually, that's not the right color. It's the lightest orange value is what we want. I made that mistake before, so I'm glad I thought about it. All right, so the first thing I want to do, I think I'm going to add just a touch of water here because I don't want it to be real harsh. So I'm going to add just a touch of water as a glaze over the area, and it's going to be a larger area. I want to extend this and bring it up in here too. So that's where I'm putting the water, but I want it to be more water than what I really need. I have my lightest value orange on my brush. I'm just almost doing what I would call a dry brush, but the paper is moist. And I'm going to extend these a little bit. Bring some of them down like this. See how much softer that is? Bring some of these down like this. Cleaning my brush. Now I'm going to just try and see if I can't pick up that same color we were just working with, and I'm going to go over the edge of this one, because I think it got just a little bit too dark right there. I just have water in my brush right at the moment, and I'm just loosening that paint. And it's going all the way through the glaze right down to the dark value, which is good because that's the one I want to fix. All right, now I'm just going to pick up the real light orange. Add some of that in there. And another reason we want to do a study like this is because now that tells me as I do this, while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to add a little bit more in here, to look out for that when I do paint the complete design. So I had a little bit of trouble in that area, so we want to watch it. Extend that down just a little bit too. There we go. So I like that better. Now this did have water on it, but just to soften it in, pick up a little bit more color. Cleaning my brush, wiping most of the moisture out. I want to make sure you can see me, and I'm just going to soften this edge away. And this Don't want any harsh lines. Same thing up on top. Now that I do like better. It's not perfect. It's not exactly the way I want to paint the completed project, but it's getting in the direction that I want to go. So now I'm going to dry this one more time, and I'll be right back with you, and we're going to put our final glaze on that petal. So I'll be right back. Okay, got everything nice and dry. I'm going to pick up my water brush, and I'm just going to gently again put water over the entire petal. I know this scares a lot of people, but you know, if you don't try it, you'll never know if you like it or not, or if it's going to improve the appearance of the petal. So it's something you've got to try. Looking at the side of my paper, making sure I've got the whole petal wet, which I did not. Always a good habit to check the side of the paper, because in the light then you can tell right where it's dry. There we go. Now I'm going to go right back to the light value. Adding a little bit of water to my puddle because it's pretty dry already. So remember, every time you add water to watercolors, it lightens them. But in this instance, I don't think it's going to really create a problem if this is just a tad lighter. Just kind of sweeping it on just like I do with my second water glaze. Making sure I don't go over the edges. You want to make sure you go right up to the old edge, but you don't want to go over it. Lift it up into the light, both directions, and it looks pretty good. So that's how I do a study. Now I wanted to do one of each petal. I just did the color mapping on this one. But now when I do this second one, I might change it completely. I might not make my darks quite so dark right in that area. To me, that's a little harsh, but that's the idea behind a study of a petal or whatever it is you're trying to figure out how to paint. Because now I've done it this way, let me try it a different way over here and see which one I like better. And that's why I did 5 different apples, so you could have a value and see where you're going, which one you think is going to fit into your design, that type of thing. So I hope this helped. Be sure and check me out at my eBay store at ebay.com/store/designs of value art. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.